This is eCoffee with Experts, where marketers and founders share what's actually working in SEO, AI, and digital growth. Grab your coffee and fuel your mind as we chat with top minds about their wins, struggles, and lessons you won't find in a blog post. Brought to you by Digital Web Solutions, we bring real talk to help you grow your business, one episode at a time. Let's get started.
Hey, hi everyone. Welcome to your show, eCoffee with Experts. This is your host, Ranmay here. And today we have Andy Groller, who is the president and CEO of Dragon 360 with us. Hey, Andy, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me on today.
Lovely. Andy, before we move any forward, why don't you talk us through your journey a bit, how it all started, and also how you landed up in the digital marketing, paid search. Earlier, it was a bit of SEO at your agency as well, and that niche, and also a bit about your agency, what you guys do, your core offerings, and we take it off from there.
Yeah, sure. I'll save you the full scope of the conversation and journey that I took, just because it kind of meanders a little bit. But I've been at Dragon 360 for, I think it's coming on 17 or 18 years. So we were founded in 2007. I got hired in 2008 as employee number 3 to head up the PPC division, as it was called back then. I had come into it basically straight out of college, didn't know what I was doing. So learning on the fly, trying to figure things out, trial by fire at a time when there were so many changes in the landscape, similar to the things that are happening today with LLMs and AI and all the other disruptions that are happening within the digital system. Fast forward probably about 10, 12 years, give or take. And through that course of time, I was learning about all the other areas of digital, as well as elevating my position in the company, ultimately becoming CEO and managing partner, like I said, around 5, 6, 7 years ago, somewhere in that range. Over the course of that time, I think it's important just to mention that we were working with anyone and everyone, not so much local companies. We're based out of upstate New York, but our team is remote for the most part across the East Coast of the US, but more so regional and national clients across D2C, B2B, and a bunch of other kind of micro industries. But what I had found during that tenure of working myself up through the company is that we had always done paid media and advertising really well. We had always done it best for B2B. So around that time, we made the decision to really focus in on those core strengths. B2B, particularly SaaS, tech, and professional services, and really leaning into our core offering, which is digital advertising strategy and management. So as you move forward to today, those are still the primary ICPs and the primary offerings that we provide. Everything from search and social through to connected TV, ABM. We also do HubSpot migrations and services and automation setups, a lot to do with 6 Sense and other ABM platforms. And ultimately, we've elevated ourselves out of that PPC moniker that it was back in the day into being seen as a true digital advertising agency that is really pushing the needle and driving a lot of ROI for our clients.
Lovely. Quite a journey, I must say. You have helped grow Dragon 360, beyond a small performance shop into now a full-scale B2B growth partner, like you said. So what are some of the core decisions that you feel were, kind of really helped in that transition and kept the business sustainable at the same time?
I think the inflection point was when myself, but also with the aid of some other senior employees of ours, came to the realization that, we really needed to niche down. We really needed to focus on our strengths and stop trying to do too much and be the jack of all trades and master of none. We had always done everything really well, don't get me wrong, but that inflection point made the difference as far as how we moved our path forward of really focusing on B2B as the core ICP of our audience and offerings, but really understanding if we're putting the advertising services that we've always been best at as our core, right? What are the spokes that come off of that create new revenue streams and new opportunities to grow ourselves into new positions within the agency landscape when we're out at events and out trying to grab new business? And those two things definitely were creative and content, and ultimately surrounding that strategy, right? Not just being seen as a lever puller or a task vendor, right? Really putting ourselves into the position of driving the needle forward for our clients and partnering with them as we had always done, but in a very more strategic, targeted way. I think that was a huge inflection point. The second one probably is maybe like 2-3 years ago, as we started to think about what does that look like from a process perspective, right? There's so many advertising agencies out there. It's a commodity in so many respects by so many other end clients and things like that. So how do we set ourselves apart? Well, how we looked at that is what sets us apart in how we view and develop our campaigns. A lot of it comes back to positioning and messaging and audience segmentation. We look at it through the lens of you've got your big brand picture, your big positioning and messaging. But when you think about it from a paid perspective, right? You think about the various audiences, whether it's champions and decision makers, different verticals, different nuances within the businesses that you are trying to grow as a customer with. And all of that really needs to be peeled down, right? It needs to be nuanced, it needs to be massaged into a way that actually speaks to those audience segments in a more deliberate, personal way. And how could we do that effectively, right? We do that effectively through our research, through our content, our creative, and not just putting stuff out there that could be generic and blend into the noise of anyone's newsfeed on LinkedIn or anyone's screen, but rather, how do we create some noise that makes our creative and our content and our messaging stand out? So that's not just an easy scroll by, but it captures an attention that we can then use to harness and power the rest of our strategy through various other means and nurturing cycles and ultimately driving pipeline at the end of the day for our clients.
Lovely. And then, you have had a long track. I mean, as an agency, Dragon 360, you have had a long track of client retention. So
Mhm.
what systems or habits, make that kind of loyalty repeatable and scalable?
Yeah, I don't even know if it's a system at this point. I think if you want to call it a system, it's a cultural system. It's
Mm-hmm.
you come in here and we are a small shop still on purpose. We're about 12 to 15 dragons at the moment. And I never want to grow it beyond, let's say, 25. And the reason being is when you get to that point, you start to lose sight of who your coworkers are, your team members are. Right now, I know everybody's spouse, I know their kids, I know everything about them, and they know everything about me. And that creates a strong bond. And it creates a strong bond of trust at the same time. And I think that trust internally then bleeds itself out into the relationships that we build with our clients. I don't believe in middlemen, account managers, or account executives. Like, the people that are working on accounts are the people actually working on the accounts. Like, those are the ones that you're talking to on an everyday
Yeah.
basis. Those are the ones that you're creating relationships with. Those are the ones that ultimately you're building trust with. And that trust then creates that retention loop that not just keeps clients of ours on hand for 4+ years. I mean, there's clients of ours that are still going back to when I first started here. It also creates the referral engine of, hey, that person went to another company. Guess who's their first call? We are, because of the relationship that we've built. So it is really kind of like a cultural process, I guess, or a system that has lent itself to just being out there and showcasing us differently.
And you also, have a co-host the Digital Banter podcast. Talk us more about it.
That was not my idea to start, just to give credit where credit is due. That was my VP of growth, James Kravik's idea. And he started up with another co-host originally as a team member, and then I came in. But what it meant to do was basically create content for ourselves with the idea of also creating connections. So interviewing people that are in the B2B space, usually like partners or other agencies or people that just were differentiated in their opinions and their viewpoints, and they didn't have to jive directly with kind of our processes. In fact, most of them don't. But in reality, like, we're ultimately trying to create new ideas and new information that anybody that's tuning into can latch onto and possibly use for their business. That was the idea, is to create value. That value can be used by others that listen in.
Absolutely. And talking about ad campaigns, you said most ads are failures because of the creative issues, but audience issues. So what is that first diagnostic step you have taken when a paid media program stops producing ROI?
Immediately digging into who we're going after. It definitely goes right into that audience aspect of things. I think it's less likely to happen when we have been involved in a program for an amount of time. It definitely happens more so when we are taking over an existing program and really looking under the hood to see not just what's working and what's not, but what's been tried and who those campaigns are ultimately going after. In many cases, we're finding that it's either too broad of an audience, right, too scattershot, or it just doesn't align with the ICP. And when it doesn't align with the ICP, naturally the creative just feels broad and generic and uninspiring. So those two just go hand in hand. And what we then do is ultimately figure out, okay, how can we create some stop gaps to the existing program? It's usually not a nuclear situation where we're trying to burn down the entire thing. It's more so, how do we create some quick wins while we do our process to build something better on top? And when we build something better on top, the ROI starts to increase. You get those incremental gains. And then if things do start to slow down, well, then it's a matter of figuring out, why are they slowing down? Is it because the content is no longer resonating? Is it because the audience has shifted and the buyer segment has shifted on behalf of the client? Has it become a little bit more convoluted? Has the client done a little bit of a tap dance around some changes in the market that forever has kind of dictated their growth trajectory, but now they haven't, caught up to where the market's going. And we need to kind of repivot our stance and our strategy based off of their offerings and how are we going to message them a little bit differently. But at the core, it always comes back to the audience and the buyers that are actively trying to buy from our clients.
And you touched upon a very important point in one of the previous questions, talking about the different AI and LLMs. So, which is now kind of, reshaping how B2B buyers discover solutions. So what is, your strategy for that?
Our strategy is to take advantage of AI where we can without sacrificing the human element of creativity. Now, what does that actually mean? That sounds like a bold statement. And it is. I just made it up off the top of my head. It's not something I canned or prepared to say or anything like that. But in reality, people will use LLMs and AI to support their research. Many times, they already have an idea of what they're looking for, and the LLMs are only being used to support and expedite the research. So how can we think about that from the perspective of the buyer, right? If we're selling an enterprise level service or an enterprise level piece of software, is somebody actually expecting all of the information to be provided to them through an LLM? If they are, then I don't know if they're the right buyer, because that means they have never bought enterprise level software before. Versus, let's say, like a PLG motion, right? Transparent pricing, pieces of information that should, in theory, be scraped and thrown into an LLM to help somebody kind of parse out their research. But at the end of the day, the human is still the buyer. Yes, there might be buying AI agents in the future, the very short future, but guess what? There's still going to be a human that's got to be influenced and informed and ultimately making the decision. So that's why when we think about how we're affecting all of this through AI and also affecting the buyers that we're trying to kind of connect with, we need to connect with them still emotionally and justify logically with the information that we're putting out there, right? The social proof, the product education components that go into a buying decision. And then emotionally, identifying with their pain points. Guess what? A robot or an AI robot, bot, whatever you want to call it, they have no emotion. They may say they have emotion, but they have no emotion. You can still connect at a human level emotionally and create that influence more so than an AI bot or AI driven creative or anything like that will ever be able to do.
100%. I agree with that. The decision of either buying a product, using a service still is being made by a human brain and a human heart, right? So that is very important to keep in consideration while we are doing all that we are, in order to influence that decision making.
Right. AI is meant to make human tasks less mundane. And that's how we're using it internally for ourselves, of course, too. But that's all it's supposed to be doing. It's supposed to be doing that and allowing humans to be more valuable in their time. That's ultimately the outcome. That is where this is and where it should be going. And that's how you take advantage of it.
Absolutely. Now, you have always cautioned against over-segmentation, right? Again, which is something a lot of marketers, us marketers, are a big fan of, right? Segmenting the target audience, segmenting the product, everything that we do, right? So what data points actually matter for defining a high value audience in a B2B tech and SaaS space as per you?
You got to think about size, period, right? There's a minimum size thresholds that you're ultimately going to market against in various ad platforms. LinkedIn's like 300 as an example there. So you still have to keep that in mind. I would say the other data points, though, too, are thinking about where the buying committee lies within those organizations, right? And not trying to stretch it too far based off of somebody's opinions. A great example of that is no matter what software, no matter what service you're selling, procurement is ultimately going to come in and probably try to kill the deal in most situations. Does that mean that we should be targeting procurement? No, because those guys are never going to be influenced or affected by literally any ad, right? They have their own needs, their own wants, their own processes that they go through. And there are still clients of ours that come to us and be like, well, procurement's, an influencer in the decision-making process. Yeah, we know that, but they're not going to be influenced by any of these campaigns.
True.
So I think when we think about that from like a segmentation perspective, like really keeping in mind who are the true champions and decision makers within that buying committee, and how can we effectively influence those advocates that are champions without kind of spraying towards, sales wish list of being in front of a CTO, CIO, CEO until the time is right. Conserve your ad dollars, use them effectively and efficiently, and build that momentum that ultimately leads you to the decision maker through various campaigns, but not just spraying and praying just because of an audience size or an audience need.
Absolutely. You have been in the business for so long now, Andy, 17 plus years now. But I've dealt with quite a few clients, and you said your retention rate is also high because of so much of, you know, transparent communication and bleeding through trust.
Yep.
So if you were to pick one of your favorite client stories in all these years, which one would that be?
Oh man. Wow. I've got a couple, but I'm going to lean into one that affected me most personally. And
Okay.
that was maybe 10 years ago, give or take. The client at the time was Autotask. So they were an ITSP, MSP software provider. Since then, they've been bought by like Datto and Kaseya. I think at this point, I don't even know what the acquisition was. But at the time, they were a major player in that space. And we had landed them as a client through my efforts and another partner's efforts. And what it did to me actually was transform my thinking and my strategic processes away from channel level insights and channel level thought processes into something that was more buyer journey based. That was more, I don't even want to say full funnel because that's not what I mean, but definitely bigger picture, thinking about all the moving parts here. How do we leverage content and creative? How do we segment audiences? It really was like a true, I guess, inflection point for me personally and changed me into a better marketer, but also a better executive because it allowed me to think in so many different ways. And they were a fantastic partner that gave me so much data to work with and collaborate on with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that changed us as an agency and changed us as a person.
Very nice. Very nice. And you have clearly made it big in the sense that, you're now running the show, your agency is doing good. Sorry. So for our young listeners today, Andy, if anyone who is trying to break through and start his own entrepreneurial journey or, start their own agency. So what would that one piece of advice you'd want to give to them?
What are you most passionate about and how is it differentiated to the market that you're going after? Because differentiation can drive revenue, but if you're not passionate about it, how long are you going to be in it for? Right? Are you just going to turn into a churn and burn agency or organization that you're just going to sell off in 2 years? Like if that's the goal, then you're not in it to win it. You're in it to win it from a financial stake, but you're not in it to win it from a personal gains perspective outside of monetary. So I think really aligning passions with differentiation makes the difference at the end of the day.
Lovely. Great, Andy. This has been a brilliant conversation, like I expected. Thank you so much for taking our time to do this with us. Really appreciate it. For our audiences, if they want to reach out to you, how would they do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Andy Groller, or just hit me up on dragon360.com.
All right. Lovely, Andy. Thank you, man. Cheers.
Thank you.